What's up, nerds, and welcome back to the Helpware Nerds YouTube channel. As promised, I'm here to talk about Stranger Things Volume 2 and the finale. Can you believe we are here at the finale of Stranger Things? Hellfire Lives. Now, I know that some of you out there are clinging to hope with Conformity Gate and all of this, and all I'm gonna say before we get into the review, I'm not one to hang on to that. I feel like that's denial and one of the stages of grief, obviously. This show has been around for about a decade, and we've all become super attached to these characters. None of us wants to let them go. None of us wants this show to really end. It has to. Was this season the best? No, and I will get into that. Did it end sweetly or bittersweetly? Yes. Did it end like a classic 80s movie? In my opinion, yes. And I feel like that is what was always at the core of Stranger Things. Not the horror elements, not like the weird sci-fi crap that we get from the show, but the 80s homage to the Goonies and Neverending Story and Indiana Jones and Star Wars, and how even despite all this BS that's going off in those movies, everything just seems to wrap up nicely. Take E.T. for example. Elliot, the main character of E.T., literally runs off with E.T. and faces no consequences at the end of that film. And I know a lot of the complaints are, how did the guys get off scot-free at the end of the everything, at the end of the finale, especially Hopper and Nancy? Well, my argument is it's a cheesy 80s ending. There is no repercussion. But we'll get into that, and that is literally just me laying down where I'm coming from. And if you've seen the thumbnail, then you know I don't believe. And we'll get into that as well. So, kicking off with Volume 2. Right. We're picking up right after Will went full sorcerer.
A real-life, honest-to-God sorcerer!
My D&D nerd in me wants to immediately tell you, Will is not a sorcerer. At all. Like, this has probably been on the internet at this point. But Will is not a sorcerer, nor could he have been a sorcerer in the 1980s, because the class didn't exist till 2000. So, unless Hellfire decided to make their own homebrew that became so good and so renowned that Wizards of the Coast bought it from Hellfire and never credited them. Like, in the Stranger Things universe, obviously. What the heck are they talking about? Will's a sorcerer. And even if that was the case, Will wouldn't be a sorcerer anyway. He'd be a warlock. Again, an impossibility, because the warlock class didn't exist at that point. I'm sorry, I'm just very, very passionate about that. It's really annoyed me that they kept calling Will a sorcerer when they're supposed to be avidly D&D nerds. And part of me really, really wanted, when they were sat in that room and Mag kept going off about Will being a sorcerer, for Erica Sinclair to turn around and go, was a sorcerer. And correct, Mike. But instead, she jumped on the bandwagon, which, again, really annoyed me because no, he's not a sorcerer. There are no sorcerers yet. But that's not really the point, is it? Anyway, my other gripe from the beginning of that episode is, Joyce, I know you had to learn to let Will go. Let him spread his wings. Great. Maybe don't throw him in the deep end. Yeah, he took on some demos. Taking on demos and then going straight for the head. Two different things. Two very, very, very different things. I'm sorry. I might be the only one that thought this, but who thought it was a good idea when Will's power comes from Vecna for him to go up against Vecna and use his powers? Yes, he managed to save Holly and Max, but look at what he had to sacrifice to get there. I know that we ended up getting that scene, and we'll get to that a bit further down the line, because I know that some people are divided on that scene, and I will put my 2 pence in on that. But basically, I feel like that was bone idiocy on all of the party, but mainly Joyce. And when she berates herself later and Hopper stands up for her, I disagree with Hop. You should have agreed with her that yes, this was her fault. Yes, she needed to let him go. But Vecna is a different kettle of fish. And attacking Vecna within his own mind when your power is his, to put it in D&D terms, like the group like to do, it's like a warlock attacking the devil that gives them their powers and expecting to come out on top. Without assistance, that's not going to work. And they didn't have Elle. They didn't have Collie at this point. They didn't have anyone. They just used Will. They didn't even try and find, like, some other way to harm Vecna while Will was doing it. To, like, keep Vecna occupied. They just sent Will as a lone soldier. They jumped the gun and paid the price. And yeah, I think that was Joyce's fault. So when she gets a bit of reprieve from Hop later, I disagree. That's my honest thoughts on that. With that. Speaking of all of that and Hop and characters, and I did mention her, I will bow my head and apologize to Collie, as I was one of those that didn't find her that trustworthy. I thought she was manipulating Elle, I will be perfectly honest. Her calling Vecna her brother was one of the signs that threw me off, as Elle has never really done that. So, having Collie call Henry her brother and get standoffish when they're calling her Elle, when we know that Elle likes to be called Elle, and things like that, it just feels like she was made to be a red herring, I guess. I think they were doing it on purpose, though. I haven't really heard anyone mention this, but I know a few years back when Eddie first died, there was a theory going around that because he died by bats, he was going to come back as a vampire, in homage to Cass, the vampire that betrays Vecna. Now, we found out that Dr. K was taking Callie's blood over and over and over and over and over again to create more numbers. Which, I kind of liked that. I wish they'd have delved more into that rather than just having it be like a side quest, to use the group's lingo. But with that happening, Callie refers to Dr. K as somewhat of a vampire. And I thought what they were doing was they were going to have Callie be the Cass of the group. And have, instead of it be she betrays Vecna, she betrays Elle. Now, I was pleasantly surprised, obviously. But I feel like they did that on purpose to be a red herring. Like, they'd heard that theory, so they had the two women with the name K, Dr. K and Carly, and had it so that they were referred to as a vampire, so that people would start to distrust, subconsciously, Callie, and think she was working for Vecna. And then they dropped clues like how she'd mind shared with other sidekicks and how she calls Henry brother and things like that, just to lay seeds of distrust and have Hopper not like her because fans like Hopper and all that sort of stuff. Just to make it so that we didn't trust Carly like Hopper didn't, so that when Hop learnt to trust her, we realised we were also wrong. Did it fully stick the landing? No. But did I regret not trusting Carly? Yes. That does bring me to the point where I don't believe she was alive at the time Elle did her self-sacrifice. Is there a possibility? Yes. Hop leaves the room and Elle is holding the bandages and telling Carly everything's going to be okay. When he comes back in, she's unconscious and we're meant to believe she's dead. We know Carly has faked her death before. That is how she escaped the unit. We were told this. That's how she escaped Dr. K. So she's a good actor at playing dead. We were given those context clues. So there is a possibility that that could be what they're doing again. And they gave us those bits of information to be able to put things together. Do I think that that's what happened? No. And I'm only bringing up this part and delving into this part of the finale because I'm talking about Carly in general. So, the reason why I don't think this is what happened is, one, we know Carly has a limit, a range. That was also established in the first episode of this volume. And we know that Elle would have had to make it all the way to the tunnel, somehow make it to a tank, or somewhere she could be deprived of her senses, and then somehow be able to use her telekinesis enough to push them back, while also maintaining the illusion that she's there. It also banks on Mike, knowing the conversation between Carly and 11, which is unlikely. Because when would him and Elle have had the time to discuss it? But that's why I don't think Elle survived. And why I apologize to Collie. On that note, Collie's death is totally Hopper's fault. He could have carried both of them. He chose to scoop Elle into his arms and run off. But she could walk. We saw that with how she managed to walk back to the room even before Murray did the most impossible throw and blow up the chopper. So if he'd have thrown one arm over his shoulder for her and one arm over his shoulder for Collie and walked them both to that room, Collie would probably still be alive. But Hopper being selfish and not trusting Collie is exactly what got Collie killed. So, sorry Hop, but you killed Collie, not the soldiers. I mean, technically it was the soldiers that killed her, but in my eyes, it was your mistake that killed her. But that's diving into the finale. In Shock Jock, I do love everything that's going on. I do love that Will and Robin have a moment, and Will thanks Robin, and Robin thanks Will. I do love how Erica and Lucas get their moment to shine. It was both of them that came up with the ideas that ultimately are the reasons that they were able to defeat Vecna. Because, yes, while Lucas's idea didn't exactly go according to plan, if Lucas's idea hadn't gone off, Max and Holly would be dead. And if Erica's plan didn't go off, then they wouldn't have been able to find Dustin and all them to get the information about it being a bridge. Because there wouldn't have been a way for them to get back to the portal. So, to be fair, everything went according to plan. And I do really like that Lucas and Erica got a moment to shine. Like I said when I did my reaction review of Volume 1, I do feel like Lucas gets forgotten about quite a bit, especially before Max comes back. But they did utilize him a bit better in Volume 2, and especially when Max came back, Lucas was utilized really well. So I do like that. Then we get to the fact that both Nancy and Jonathan and Dustin and Steve all have a fight, mirroring each other. And while I don't agree that Steve is right, you can't fully argue that he was wrong either, because it's not that he's right in what he's saying, it's that he's right in the way that he's feeling. One, he's upset for his friend, Dustin, and two, he's mad because the last thing he said to Eddie was, "Don't be a hero." And then Eddie went and became a hero, but lost his life. So it's that stage of grief where you blame the person. I feel like that's where Steve is at, where Dustin was at that stage of grief, where he was at anger. So, while Steve obviously wasn't as close to Eddie, you could still feel the grief between the two of them that they both had for this person. And Dustin was lashing out at all his friends. Steve wasn't handling it very well and was mad at Eddie for dying and not listening to him. And it all culminated in that moment. Then we get to the second episode and of Volume 2. And I've got three things to say about that. And that's the John and Nancy scene was... I've seen it online. Some people thought it was ambiguous. Some people didn't. I'm one of these people that definitely didn't think it was ambiguous at all. I think if you watched it properly and paid attention to all the context clues that you were given, and the fact that they were talking about honesty in the previous episode, and how hesitation, and how they knew each other, and how neither of them were being honest with themselves. And then they thought they were going to die. And so they decided to be honest in their last moments and tell each other how they were really feeling before culminating in the fact that Jonathan asked Nancy to not marry him. I thought that that was very on the nose, that they were like explaining that the only reason they were together was because of everything that had happened between season 1 and 4. Like, they weren't a good fit for each other. I thought it was a very great lesson to learn that you can love someone very deeply, like Nancy and Jonathan do, but not be in love with them, and know that there is no relationship there, and that while you will always and will never not love this person, you can't be romantic with them, because that's not the relationship you've got. You love this person deeply and you cherish them, and everything about them makes you feel safe and everything like that. But to being in a confined box that is a relationship is suffocating, and that is what they were saying to each other. That's what I took from it. That they were always and forever going to love each other. Like, but they weren't in love with each other. And therefore, there was no relationship there. That they only built the walls of a relationship because that was what they thought they needed to do. And Jonathan realized that doing what they thought they needed to do was the wrong thing. And that's why he didn't propose. And Nancy accepted. Could it have been handled a little bit better? Maybe. But I think if they hand-fisted it by then having Nancy go, "So we're broken up, right?" would have been ridiculous. Although I do like the fact that they do address it by having Steve and Jonathan talk, and Jonathan saying that he let Nancy go. So if there was some people that were still on the fence, there you go, that's your confirmation. They did in fact break up. The other thing that I needed to talk about was Dustin's breakdown. That scene had me completely emotional. I was crying. Especially when he was like going off on him at first and then just hugged him tightly and said, "Not you."
Not you.
The "not you," literally, I've got tears in my eyes now just talking about it. Like, you can see the weight. Like, Dustin doesn't see Steve as just a friend. He sees him as his brother, his father figure. And I feel like, had Steve died, likely say, "You die, I die." Had Steve died, Dustin would have jumped after him. I really do believe that. I don't believe Dustin would have gone on. The way he reacted to Eddie's death has me 100% believing that had Steve died either in Hawkins' lab or in the finale when he almost fell off the tower, then Dustin was going with him. There was no way on earth Dustin was sticking around without both his best friends. I also believe 100% that the Duffers knew fans weren't going to sit by and let Dustin lose another one. Like, Dusty Buns is the glue of Stranger Things. And if you hurt him, we ride at dawn sort of thing. I do think that they've done that to show that despite all that outward anger, Dustin cares more about Steve than he does anyone else in the party. And I'm not trying to downplay his relationship with his friends, but Steve is more than a friend. Steve's become his brother. That's the way I see it. Dustin is one of Steve's 6 little nuggets. So. And then we have the scene that's basically pulled directly from Jurassic Park. And Mrs. Walkham Down Wheeler, with her aura, what the heck? She looked absolutely amazing there. She didn't even know what a Demogorgon was. She saw those lights flicker, heard one of her basement babies was in trouble, and immediately ripped those pipes out of herself and went, bet, I'm not having this happen again. Joyce Byers has nothing on Karen Wheeler. I'm sorry. Like, I know Joyce gets the finishing blow on Mr. V-Man, but like, nah, nothing on Karen Wheeler in my opinion. Karen Wheeler went toe-to-toe with a Demogorgon and with a wine bottle in Volume 1. And in Volume 2, she grabs an air canister and, with a scar around her neck, traipses through the hospital after ripping pipes out of her own body to save one of her basement babies in a basement. Yeah, it was awesome. I absolutely loved it. I also love the fact of her scene at graduation with Mike. Mrs. Wheeler, you didn't really do anything for 4 seasons, but this season, you are redeemed, lady. Ted, you can, to quote Derek the Legend, suck a fat one, but Mrs. Wheeler, you're awesome. I absolutely adore you. You go down in the Mom Hall of Fame with Steve Harrington at the top. You next, and then Joyce Byers can come last. Because, I mean, she didn't realize Will was missing for 24 hours. So, sorry to any Joyce fans out there. But like, nah, Karen Wheeler is my girl this season. Like, damn. And then we got all that stuff with Holly and Max. Now, I know that the argument is she didn't need the song anymore. My problem, and I've discussed this with one of my cousins, so my argument may have changed from that if you're watching, cuz when we talked about it, he pointed out some stuff, and to be honest, he's actually right. What was Max's goal here? To take Holly with her to the red plane, so like the upside down, and then abandon her to go into her own body, which she has no idea where it is. Yes, she assumes it's in the upside down, but she has no idea where in the upside down. She just assumes it's in the upside down. She then tells her to run from Vecna. For all she knows, Vecna is surrounded by an army of Demogorgons, Demodogs, and Demobats. So she wants Holly Wheeler, a child, to try and escape the nest, to try and get to her own house. Like, then she sees Lucas and is immediately like, right, you can't come with me, Holly. Peace, bye. Only to immediately feel guilty and start having a 3-hour podcast before Holly and her triumphantly go through their portals at the slowest pace ever. And this is coming from a guy with a physical disability that would have took twice as long to get to the portals. But like, they ran to those portals very, very slow, and I don't know if a slow motion effect was used, but if so, why? Because that was ridiculous. Were you trying to recapture the running up the hill moment? Because if you were, it didn't work, and all it did was make them look ridiculous. And also, Max, you are a terrible babysitter. Please never look after my children. You literally sent a child, a literal child, to the nest where Vecna's physical form will be waiting. When, if she'd have gone back to the cave, she had guaranteed safety at that point. Now, we know from later on Henry does manage to force his way into the cave. But at that point, we didn't know he could do that. So, she had guaranteed safety at that point. I don't get the logic. Then there's Robin and Vicky. Let's just say, Robin, you could have handled that a lot better. I know you stole drugs, and so obviously Vicky's gonna think you're a druggie. And all that, and you are covered in bruises. And then you are telling a story about an evil wizard and monsters from another dimension. Any nurse or sane person who gets all those bits of information put together is going to think you are hallucinating. So, I do feel sorry for Vicky. But as far as I'm concerned, I think Vicky and Robin broke up. I think Robin's jab at overbearing partners was at Vicky. Because I don't think Vicky could handle everything that went on with the Upside Down. And I think because of that, her and Vicky eventually split. I think had they stayed together when they were doing their montage of everyone with their happy endings, we would have seen Vicky and Robin at Enzo's, maybe with Hop and Joyce, not at the same table, but when they were at Enzo's, it would have panned over to a table, and that's where Vicky and Robin would have been. But because we didn't get that, and Robin was with the group on top of the Squawk Tower, Squawk radio station thing, I'm of the mind that Vicky and Robin didn't last the 18-month time jump, which isn't surprising in the slightest, seeing as though when Vicky was getting scared, Robin's go-to response was suck it up. Which, again, I don't blame Robin for. She's been dealing with this for years, and they're in the end game. She needs to focus. But that wouldn't be a great move for a new relationship where you've been absent for most of it. So I can see why Vicky wouldn't feel supported. And they would probably move on after everything had settled down. And Robin had finished grieving Elle, and they had their conversation about what they were going to do next, and all that stuff. So, I don't think they survived the time jump at all. And while obviously Vicky was proven wrong in the aforementioned Jurassic Park Demodog scene, the which was awesome. And Lucas, you are a king for keep playing that music, even when your life was on the line. I don't think Vicky was cut out to be Robin's partner, especially with her asking about girls at Nancy's college, which we do learn Nancy dropped out of. But with her asking about that, which I do believe she was asking for herself, I know there are some people that thought she was asking if Nancy'd found anyone. I personally think she was asking for herself. And because I think she was asking for herself, it lends credence to me that her and Vicky did, in fact, split. So, yeah, that is my 2 cents on Rockin' Robin and the and Vicky, which I do remember saying in Volume 1 that I wish we'd have saw more of Vicky, and we did get to see more of Vicky, but she wasn't really cut out for party life. And it's a shame because I did kind of want that relationship to work out for Robin, because we did kind of get to see that blossom throughout the series. But I do like that it's also realistic. Like, I know Stranger Things is a sci-fi show and not everything has to be realistic, but it is realistic that not every relationship will last. So, yeah, it's bittersweet that Vicky and Robin probably didn't make it out of the time jump, but they didn't, in my opinion. And yeah, and then we get to the bridge. Now, Vecna's plan, or Henry's plan, isn't really clear by this point. Like, we don't really know what he wants. And to be honest, I would say we don't really know what he wants by the finale. Other than the scientist guy in the cave says that the mind flayer will consume all. So I'm assuming it just wants to feed on everything. And that's why it wants to merge the Abyss with Earth. But again, not really explained properly. But in the bridge, we get an explanation of the Upside Down being a wormhole. Now, I absolutely love this. I love the Upside Down not being the other dimension, but being the way to the other dimension. And while it's bad, Holly ends up back with Vecna. Thank God Vecna was there. Otherwise, what was going to happen? Holly was going to be a pancake? How were the other guys going to catch her? So, big up V for that. Like, they might be mad that Vecna got a hold of Holly again, but I know that was at the end of the last episode, but we only find out about it in this. So, like, technically, thank God he was there. And Mr. Clark jumping straight into the Upside Down. Perfect for all of this. I like Mr. Clark full stop. I love his and Maury's reality together. Him and everything, Schnookums, all of that, perfect. Murray calling himself Santa Claus throughout the entire series is great. I wish we'd have got more of an epilogue for Murray. We got an epilogue for virtually everyone except Murray. So I'm assuming he just went back to being a conspiracy nut, which that's the only question that is burning. Well, there are others, but like for character closure, I mean. So yeah. I feel like there was a lot in this one, but the two main ones are that Steve Harrington is the guy that comes up with the plan. Who saw that coming? Who had that on their Stranger Things bingo card that Steve the Hare Harrington is the one that comes up with the beanstalk plan to save everyone, because I didn't. I absolutely love Robin and Mike arguing over the music for the bomb. I love Nancy gatekeeping guns, and I love the moment where Eddie and Dustin's weapons are revealed, and Dustin just hands one to Steve and is like, "It's yours now." It feels like a combination of their fight, of their acceptance, and now they're moving on. It does feel like the stages of grief. We saw Dustin play them out on screen. I feel like it was a little rushed towards the end, but we were getting towards the end. And then there's the scene that everyone talked about.
I don't like girls.
And I think it's the one that needs the main focus for this specific episode. And the reason why I've left it so long to actually talk about this until right now, when I've dived into everything else throughout, is because this needs a big focus. Now, a lot of people thought it was long, drawn out, he rambled, and didn't get to the point quick enough. I've even seen edits of people having Will's coming out scene and the final fight with Vecna, and then Vecna's death, while Will is still coming out and being like, look, it took Will longer to come out than to kill Vecna. That was a bad thing? No, it wasn't. What people need to realize is that it's not the modern era. I know that it's still hard to come out in the modern era. It's not as easy as people seem to make it out to be. And, you don't just blurt it out. It is still a well of emotion. However, it's not as hard as it was in the 80s. And I'm not just saying that from an uneducated point of view or anything like that. In the 1980s, we had the AIDS pandemic going on. And with that, coming out in the 80s didn't just have this fear of disownment or anything like that, but it had this fear of never being touched again, never being seen as clean again, never having anyone want to associate with you again. Not just family members, but society in general. Because with that, you had this stigma of what we know now, that AIDS can be given to anyone. But back then, they believed that only those that were homosexual could catch it. So if you would have come out back then, you may have been seen as unclean. And while that is awful and wrong, and Will probably feared that by saying it, not only would the party turn their backs on him, but may even give him to Vecna. It sounds far-fetched, but this was emotions people were dealing with. People were ostracized from their communities just for liking who they liked. And it does still happen. I'm not saying it doesn't. But it happens a lot less than it did. But they were kicked out of the communities. They were abandoned. In some cases, they were arrested. Again, not saying that this doesn't happen. It does in some countries. But Will is a kid in the 80s. He has to deal with all of this, while also the community isn't out and proud. They didn't have parades like they do now. They didn't have like open gay bars. Eventually they will, but they in bigger communities. But in rural communities like Hawkins, they didn't have gay bars where people could meet and learn about each other and learn what it means to be gay or um, of any sexual orientation. They just had the conformity, the white picket fence. And with that, Will was already seen as Zombie Boy. And he didn't want to be seen as other again. And he was so scared that that he would no longer be allowed to be with his friends. And I think two of the strongest scenes in Stranger Things to me is the hug scene, which has everyone who's important to Will make physical contact with Will, and the scene on the water tower in the finale where Mike shares water with Will. Now, as I said, we're in the AIDS pandemic. Now, obviously, it's not openly talked about on Stranger Things, but not only touching people, but sharing liquids with people of a different orientation would have been a big, big no-no back then. And Mike just does it casually, without a second thought. I probably rambled more than Will did, but I feel very strongly about this as um, someone who's bisexual myself and all that. I really feel very strongly about how this was perceived, and a lot of people I think took this the wrong way and thought that they were drawing it out for clickbait and pandering to people, and I feel like they were just giving it the gravitas it really needed because of the time period they chose to set their era in, and they wanted a character that was gay, and they went with Will Byers, and they wanted to have that weight of being gay in the 80s actually being important and strong. And while it is still a liberating moment because it's something Vecna can no longer use against him, it's also a terrifying moment. Because imagine it again, but then imagine that scene and Will does his whole spiel, but instead of getting up to hug him, everyone that got up to hug him gets up and walks out. And that's the end of Stranger Things. Like, we don't see the big fight with Vecna. We don't see anything else. They just get up and walk out. Now, it's not real. That's what Vecna showed Will. Imagine that's what Will had just seen happen in his mind because of Vecna, and then he had to do it again so Vecna couldn't do that to him again. That's the weight of what Will was dealing with. And correct me in the comments if I got anything historically wrong or factually wrong, please. I don't want to be seen as getting anything wrong on the internet. I have done as much research as I possibly can on this, and it's why this video has taken so long for me to be able to do. I didn't want to just drop it without like looking into as much of this as I possibly could. But obviously I wasn't alive in the 80s. I'm only reading secondhand accounts and things that I can find. I might be completely wrong, but these are things that people have talked about, and I really hope that I've represented it properly, because I really do think that this is a very important topic that did need talking about, because, well, I think that scene was misrepresented a lot across social media. Um, and yeah, I hope you think I did that justice if you are in the LGBTQIA community. But if not, please let me know in the comments. Um, but yes, moving into the finale. The main thing that I have with it, the military, I haven't really touched on them. They were absolutely useless and not needed whatsoever. They've done absolutely nothing this season. They've added nothing except a stupid side quest to basically to just justify killing 11 off. That's what they were there for. They were there to justify killing 11 off at the last minute. Personally, I feel like that's all they were there for. They wanted a reason. They needed a reason to kill 11 off, and they were like, okay, Dr. K and the military are reopening Brenner's experiments. That's what the military's there for. Well, are they gonna? They'll take over Hawkins. Cool. Are they gonna catch 11? No. Are they gonna try and catch 11? Yeah. Are they gonna have a secret weapon to stop 11's powers? Yeah. Are we gonna explain it? No. Are they gonna um actually be competent? No. Is Dr. K gonna be smart? Yeah. Is she gonna actually be able to do anything? No. Like, at the end of the show, after Nancy walked him down Wheeler and Hop killed a dozen soldiers each, are they just gonna walk free? Yeah. What? What was the point in the military besides just giving Jane L a reason to die? Like, I'm sorry, they didn't do anything. Vecna tricked Hop into shooting the tank that 11 was in and then made him believe she was dead. So he broke her out, which meant she wasn't in his mind anymore to help with Derek and the rest of the kids and Holly, which meant Carly wasn't, or Max. I think that role should have gone to the military man that was tracking L. Rather than Hop being the one to shoot the tank, the military man should have come in and actually shot the tank. Obviously, it shouldn't have gone through and wounded L, but it should have shattered the tank, causing L to lose her connection. And that should have been what went wrong. That's my correction on that, because then the military would have actually had something to do. As for Dr. K and all that, we kept saying, where are the Demogorgons? Where are the Demodogs? Where are the Demobats? Or at least I did, didn't you? Sorry. Like, why didn't Vecna have them be dealing with the military so that when the planets started to collide, there was no army there ready to, stop him in some way, shape, or form? The Demogorgons and Demodogs and Demobats could have been taking care of that. Alternatively, were the Demogorgons, Demodogs, and Demobats sacrificed to create the eldritch body of the Mind Flayer? Because that was a theory that Top Nerd 2025 Ashley floated to me when we were having a conversation, like, about this. I don't know, like, but if you'd have had the Demogorgons having a war with the military and Dr. K on one front, while Dr. K is like searching for Erica, Mr. Clark, Max, and Vicky, and then and then she gets back to the base, and the base is overrun by Demogorgons, who I don't know, Vecna sent them after Max again, or because he saw her in his mind, or he thought L11 was in the material plane rather than in the upside down, so he sent the Demogorgons there. And when she arrives at when she arrives at the Squawk, she is overrun by Demogorgons and killed. That would have been cool. Then you have the whole military after 11, and they could be stopped in the same way they're stopped, but they could have been the ones that got L out of the mind, and Vecna wasn't the one that directly interfered with that. So you've got the military getting involved and ruining the plan inadvertently, and then Hop deals with them the way that he deals with them. Sorted. Then you've got the whole fight with Vecna. If they didn't have done that, the military wouldn't have been. They would have still been useless, but they would have had something happening with them. Instead, they show up. We get them say, "Oh, spotted the girl. Oh, don't tell them." Disappear for ages. Oh, oh, so they're at the radio station. Cool. Vanished. Oh, we didn't check upstairs, so Mr. Clark and Erica are fine. You're the military and you didn't check upstairs. What? Like, I'm sorry, but utter incompetence. And then Elle dies and they just pull out a Hawkins and everything's fine. I know, again, Ashley and me had a conversation about this and came to the conclusion that because it was a Black Ops operation, they probably wanted to sweep it under the rug, probably like pardoned the party in what do you call it, in exchange for complete silence. So they had to sign some sort of documentation that says they wouldn't talk about anything that they saw or anything to do with the Upside Down or the experiment, in exchange that they wouldn't go to prison, that sort of thing. That would be the most logical, and we just didn't see that because of the time jump. Like, with it being a Black Ops thing, because if they just pulled all the kids into prison and all that stuff, then all those parents would wonder what happened to their kids and things like that, and it would bring too much unnecessary attention to the military. And if it was supposed to be a Black Ops thing, you wouldn't want attention on it. So I kind of see them going that route. It could work. It's slightly annoying, I do get that, but it is slightly annoying. Hey ho, I guess. I've already talked about it, but I don't think 11 is alive. So the whole sacrifice thing was gut wrenching, and then her saying to Mike, "You'll understand someday." I don't really think he will, because he's on the same amount of copium that the Stranger Things fandom is with this conformity gate theory that everybody's got, that there is going to be a secret episode. Again, I don't believe there's going to be a secret episode, and I actually enjoyed the finale for what it was, which I think was a cheesy 80s movie ending. But do I think it was the perfect ending? 100% not. Do I think some of the endings were spot on, though? Like Steve becoming a coach? Yes. Steve becoming a coach and the sex ed teacher was absolutely amazing for Steve. And Steve being the one who stays, like in Stephen King books, which the Duffers have said are inspirations for them, is amazing. I do like that Steve is the one that stays in Hawkins. It does fit his character. Nancy dropping out of college to go work at the Herald and become basically Lois Lane is spot on for her. I mean, Robin does joke about her becoming a Navy SEAL, but let's face it, she could have gone from journalist to Navy SEAL. I can see her becoming a war reporter in in no time. We know she can handle herself, so having her be a war reporter would be spot on for her. Um, and everything. Having Jonathan finally go to NYU, paying off what Joyce told his dad in season 1 when Will went missing, was absolutely amazing. I really loved the fact that Jonathan finally got to do that. And that they remembered that they'd said that Jonathan wanted to go to NYU. So, and that his film seems so Jonathan. I'm sad we won't actually get to see that, but that is pretty cool. And then I like how they kind of left what Robin's up to ambiguous. I wish she'd have stayed on as as the radio host, but I do know that she only took over from Jimmy Fast Hands because he'd left before the lockdown, and obviously now that he's back, it's his radio station, so he would take it over again. Um, but yeah, it is nice to see that the teen side of it have all grown up and found their place in the world, and then we've got Joyce moving on with Hop and getting engaged. I'm not a big fan of their relationship. I wish they'd have had time to flesh it out a bit more. I do prefer Joyce and Bob together. R.I.P. Bob. But I do like it for Hop more than I do Joyce. And I do think it's going to be nice. And I do think the nod to Montauk, which was the original name for Stranger Things. Check out our Facebook page. We did a fun fact on that. So, nice little shameless plug there. But yeah, that was a nice nod there to the original name for Stranger Things. I did like that. I liked Hop passing on his entire character arc as advice to Mike as well. And I liked Mike and the gang finally being cool and getting invited to a party after the best Dustin scene ever. And that is Dustin's valedictorian speech where he dropped in his little D&D nerdy chaos and all that stuff. Hellfire lives and did exactly what Eddie said he was going to do at graduation and flipped Principal Higgins the bird, grabbed his diploma, and ran like hell. It was amazing. I absolutely loved it. I loved the fact that both his mums, Steve Harrington and his actual mum, were cheering for their little rocker baby. It was awesome. I do think that Dustin flirting with the girl in the crowd does unfortunately imply that him and Susie Pooh broke up. Oh, it turns out they did not have a never-ending story. Oh well, but that is what it is, I guess. And then they play their final game of D&D, and Max calls Mike out for a bullshit ending. And I agree, bullshit ending. What do you mean an NPC comes in and saves everyone? No. What are you doing, Mike? Why were they cheering? As a D&D player and a DM, why were they cheering that an NPC took over and saved them? A DM insert saved you. You didn't do it. There was no player agency there. That's just my D&D heart like breaking when I saw that. I was like, what? No. They didn't do that. You did. But okay. No player agency there, but then he used it to tell them the story of their future. And I like that Steve and Dustin still go on holidays together. I love that Max and Lucas stay together, which implies they stay together in Hawkins. I love Will going off to college and finding himself, and finding his community. I love that it kind of implies, and this is where I took it, so correct me if you didn't see it this way, or let me know if you didn't see it this way. But I took it that because the Duffers took inspiration from Stephen King, that Mike went on to become the Stranger Things universe's equivalent to Stephen King. And I actually really love that. I love that he became a writer and was writing eldritch horror and things like that in adventure stories. Uh, and then obviously he came up with his fan fiction of Elle's survival, which again I think is just Mike's copium, and things like that. So I'm sorry if you are a believer. I'm not. Hashtag I don't believe. But you're free to do what you want. I think that's the beauty of this ending. Everyone is free to believe what they want about Elle and whether she lived or died. I just don't. Like I said, we know there are context clues that Carly has faked her own death before, so it is possible that she did it again. But I also think that the explosion that took out the Upside Down happened directly above her, so she would have been taken out first before 11 was, and therefore I don't think so. But then again, we don't know, and that's the beauty of it. We don't know, and because we don't know, I think it's great. On top of that, the moment where they're all placing their binders and crying was absolutely amazing. And then when Mike's about to go upstairs and Holly and all her friends burst downstairs and take the seats at the table, and the baton is officially passed, and Mike just smiles. I wept. I wept like a baby. It's like passing the torch from yourself to your sister, and oh, being able to share something like that with family is amazing. I got my sister into D&D. She's my older sister, but I got my older sister into D&D. My younger sister is into Stranger Things, really wants to try D&D. I took my cousin to D&D, so seeing other people get into D&D through like introducing it to them is something that I really really enjoy. And then being able to see that on screen between Mike and Holly, it just brought back all those feels. And yeah, I'm not ashamed to say that I cried like a baby. And yeah, I do love that it ended how it started, with a game of D&D. And before we end this video, um, I'm not, and we're talking about moments that I cried at, I'm not ashamed to say when Joyce cut off Vecna's head and we got a flash of every single person that died because of Vecna, I'm not ashamed to say I cried there too. Especially when it showed Bob and Eddie. And especially Bob, and then Nancy like crying for days after. Bob's death is still one of the hardest hitting in Stranger Things history, and I will stand on business when it comes to that, because it didn't need to happen. It literally only happened by accident. Like, she wasn't involved in any of it. The other deaths were sort of connected to fighting Vecna and the Upside Down. But Bob, no. Wrong place, wrong time. Devastating. And with that then, I wouldn't say this series rolled a natural 20, but I wouldn't say it rolled a nat 1 either. Let me know what you guys think in the comments of this series. Do you think it missed the mark? Do you think it was good? I'm in the middle of the road. I think that there were definitely things that were missed. I think that we definitely should have got a concrete thing on where the hell were the Demogorgons, why it was a desert. I do like the fact that we got a Venom hive mind symbiote thing with the Mind Flayer and Henry, and that they didn't go with the Anakin Skywalker Darth Vader route and just went with the Venom route for pop culture references. And Derek is just a legend, so enough said. But like I do wish that there was things answered. There were some things that needed to be answered. And I do think that the main ones are, where were the Demogorgons? Why wasn't Will hurt when Vecna died? If the hive mind was what were linking them all, then Will should have been feeling the pain Vecna was feeling, and he wasn't, so that doesn't make sense. Why was it a desert when the Mind Flayer supposedly likes it cold? Why did they need 12 children specifically? Why the 6th of November? What was so important about the 6th of November? Like, I know it was the day Will was taken, but what was so important about it? And all that stuff. What happened to Murray after the time jump? I know we see him at the graduation. He sat, I think he sat with Mr. Clark. But, like, we don't really know what happened to him after that point. And then, yeah. And what happened with the military? Did they just leave? Did they sign a non-disclosure agreement? What happened? But yeah, with that then, guys, I think I'm going to call this video to an end. Let me know what your questions are for this series, and again, let me know if you liked it. But as always, stay happy, stay healthy, and stay nerdy, and remember, Hellfire lives.